Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. I'm Reed Price, the director here, and I'm very happy to have you here with us today. We're going to be talking about Pride, which is often celebrated in June, but we are so proud we're doing it in July too. And in fact, there are Pride festivals that continue, not only on Bainbridge, which is coming right up, but also in the area. And we're going to talk a little bit about the value and origins of Pride. But first, I want to thank Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island for sponsoring Something to Talk About. We meet several times a week, and Fieldstone is an underwriting business that helps us out with making that possible. They have independent living and assisted living and memory care up on Rolling Bay. To find out more about that and about their respite and daycare services, and to get a tour or just enjoy lunch for free on them, call 206-594-1010. Ask for Celia or Jamie. You can also check them out online at fieldstonecommunities.com. And we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Puget Sound Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish tribe. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that they have been taking care of the land and water as stewards of these areas since time immemorial. And we are grateful for their hospitality and willingness to teach us how to be better stewards as well. Let's begin a little bit, and our regular coordinator of a lot of discussions here on Something to Talk About is putting together a little panel of folks who are going to help us explore this topic today.
Thank you, Reed. Yeah, I just thought, a lot of people know that Pride exists, and a lot of people don't remember why Pride exists. And I thought it would be a good thing to kind of provide just a little bit of an overview and have people talk a bit about the first Pride events they ever went to and what they remember about them. I think a lot of people don't realize that the first Pride marches were organized in New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago on June 28th to commemorate the first year anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And that was really one of those things that made a real difference in the world, right? It changed the world because people stood up and said, that's enough. It wasn't until about 1974, I think, as I recall, was the first Pride event in Seattle, and they had less than 200 people. Well, if you went to the Pride Parade this year, you saw it was quite a different experience now, which is pretty awesome. And I wanted to kind of check in with any of you who remember like how that felt to go to the first Pride event for you, or what you can remember about that. Rick, do you want to chime in, or Don?
What I remember about it is going there in trepidation and a concern that I might lose my job when I got back to work if I had been seen there.
And how did that go?
People came up to me at lunch and they said, "Way to go, Don."
So that had to be kind of a relief, but I think that concern was there for a lot of people because it had been unsafe for so long, right?
Right.
It's like, is this just another excuse for becoming a target? Or, it's been surprising how much warmth and support there has been, really. Rick, do you want to throw in anything?
Sure. My first Pride was 1978, I believe. So that would be the fourth Pride. I was thinking it was the third, but the fourth, there was about 1,600 people marching. I was one of them down, I think, 3rd Avenue. And we had music. We had a band in there somewhere. And I remember people on the sidewalk seemed to wonder what the hell we were doing and why we were there. And I do recall wondering about my new employer and what would happen if they saw me, but I felt better about just being there, and I wasn't worried to death that I would lose my job. I didn't care that much. I could get another one. So that's helps when you're younger and you can feel like you got options. But I just had to be there. And looking back, I think, well, it seems a little naive because it wasn't real. People weren't really out that much at the time. but I'm glad I did it, and it's a good memory, and gives me a story to talk about occasionally. So it was
I
good.
do remember in Seattle, some of the early ones standing on the sidewalk and having people say, "Is this Seafair? Or where are the
Yeah.
pirates?" It's
Yeah.
like, wait, what? Because it hadn't really, Capitol Hill, yes. I was
Yeah.
on the board of Country Doctor Community Clinic back then, and so Pride was a very big deal in Capitol Hill. But for a
Mhm.
lot of Seattle, it was still very neighborhood divided, and there were, like you said, a lot of people were not out really, and it took a while before it became much more part of the popular culture. The way I mean, when I saw that there's Pride banners and stuff at Safeway for sale, you know, next to the 4th of July stuff, I thought, oh, well, alrighty then. That says something
Yeah.
about where we are today. What about you, Mike?
So I remember, I think the first Pride parade I walked in was 2018. And at that time, I was working for the school district and I was president of the union that represented the classified employees. And I was not out yet. And I sort of wondered to myself, can I risk organizing a delegation of people from the union to go into march in the Seattle parade? So I went ahead and did it, and I was surprised that I was able to recruit about 6 or 8 people to march with me. All of us basically, I think, were posing as allies. I don't know about everybody else coming out, but it was like one of the important steps for me in my process of coming out. And I remember how exhilarating it was to be with so many people that were friendly and supportive and had great costumes and great banners and all kinds of different people from different backgrounds and stuff. And marching down, is it 4th Avenue or 5th Avenue that they marched down in Seattle? Anyway, and thinking to myself, I wonder if there's going to be any negative consequences to this, because it felt like a risk to me at that time.
Anne, I wonder if you or Mike are playing with something next to the computer. I'm hearing a little noise, like a
It was
click,
probably
click, click.
it was probably me.
Okay, great.
Stop it.
No more noises.
Yeah, I think that that risk feeling was pretty strong for a lot of people for a long time, and they're not wrong. I mean, there have certainly been occasions around the country and around the world where it's still not necessarily safe. Even, here on the island, we're not allowed to set up the Pride event a day overnight because the police said they can't make sure that it doesn't get vandalized, which reasonable, fair enough. But I just think we all are kind of in that place of feeling pretty safe, pretty held, and also being aware that there's kind of an edge. What was your experience marching in the 4th of July parade as queer elders this year? How did that feel?
I've done it for several years now, and it's always feels wonderful because I feel like there's a selection of reactions. There's some people you can't tell what their reaction is. Other people seem slightly puzzled, like they're trying to figure out exactly what we're doing or who we represent. And we march right behind the senior center and stuff. But it's generally
I'm hearing a whoosh whoosh.
Put your hands on your lap, Mike.
I wonder if you're putting your hand across the top of the computer or something.
Yeah.
okay. Sorry about that. Good idea, Rick. No, but generally, I always feel like it's really exhilarating to see how many people seem to make a point of cheering for us and whistling and clapping and waving and giving us thumbs up. So is there any whoosh whoosh noise right now? Okay, good. But I wanted to say something that George Shannon and I were talking about recently, and he made an emphasis on that what is the opposite of pride? It is shame. And that's what so many people were made to feel over the years about their orientation and stuff. And that's why the word pride is so important. And I remember thinking way back, I don't know when I first heard gay pride. And back then I was like, that's something to be proud of. You know, it seemed like an oxymoron. But I think it's more and more important, and I feel so validated and supported living on the island and seeing how many people go out of their way to express positive feedback around Pride and to our group. And like I was wearing a hat that my friend Fern gave me that has the Pride flag on the front of it, and somebody was saying, that's a really cool hat you've got on, and other people just giving me thumbs up, like going out of their way to be supportive. So yeah.
You know, the term of gay pride started back, I think, 1971 at the Chicago, that year's Chicago event. And it was exactly that, Mike. It was like in contrast to shame and ostracism and everything else. It's like, and you know, Black pride was sort of rising in the same current in that same period. Say it loud. And I've heard people say it loud, we're queer and we're proud, right? It's like coming out and being unashamed, or working on it at least. Because when you have these lifelong scars, you don't just like one day and one phrase doesn't turn things around. I think that's another part of why it still feels really important to me to have pride celebrations for kids, for families, for allies, for bystanders. So a lot of people start to say, oh, you know, yeah, it's something to be perfectly proud of. Just it's a normalizing way for people to see that the entire, what our friend Eve would call the queer umbrella, the umbrella of queer uh, people is huge and enormous and wonderful and full of astonishing, great people, right? And that is something to definitely be proud of. Do you,
Somebody,
Don or Mike, do you remember when you first kind of started hearing those terms? Oh, Mike, you're muted. I mean, Don is muted.
Yeah, remembering it as early as 1973 or four, something like that. Kind of what I expected to hear.
How about you, Rick?
That would have been 77 when I came out. I began learning very quickly about how things worked, and that I wasn't the only one in the world. There really were other people out there like me. And I fortunately had a mentor at the University of Washington who went on to have a very successful career in the arts in Seattle. But he just took me under his wing, he and his boyfriend, and said, okay, go here, go to this party, and so on. And just I learned very quickly from the many friends I accumulated. So I can't tell you the day or the time or how it was, but I'm certain that's how it just came about. I was a sponge. I wanted
Well,
to
and
know.
having a mentor or several mentors is
Mhm.
super helpful, because I think, you know, one of the things that caused us to begin the Queer Elders in the first place was because there are a lot of single people or new people to the island who don't have a way in, kind of, and are looking to make some connections. And I feel like, you know, the generosity and kindness of that initial group has been amazing. Read.
It was it was also kind of around the time of the pandemic, and I remember how many of the young folks in the high school, we were meeting almost exclusively online,
Right.
and young people were curious about, you know, what's it like to grow up queer? What am I looking forward to? And those were rich conversations.
I'm laughing because I remember doing the panel at BEMA, maybe, I think, and we were all, you know, and one of the kids said, in a slightly horrified look, I never thought about being old and queer, right? Like, huh? But they did have so
We
many.
never think about being old.
I still kind of don't. But they had so many questions about how did you make it through those really hard years? What gave you support and strength? How did you find each other? Can we learn your stories? And I feel like that's part of what we're trying to do here with archiving some of our stories, that there be a resource for people coming along behind us, right? My friend Lily Kodama, who's often a docent at the Japanese Exclusion Memorial, and she was 7 when her family was taken off, and when she does programs with kids, one of them said to her, "Oh, so Lily, are you a historic artifact?" She's like, "Oh yeah, I guess I am." But I guess in some ways we are historic artifacts too, right? Like first generation coming into the world where you could have a pride event, right, where you could claim something for yourself that felt really positive.
As someone who grew up for decades without any role models that I can think of people who are gay or out, or that there is a way to be a successful human being as a gay man, it seems so incredibly important. And I'm always hoping that when we march in the July 4th parade or in Seattle Pride or participate in any way, we're like a lighthouse of hope to people who may be questioning their own orientation, or worrying about it, or feeling coming from a less supportive background, that it's really important. And I wish I had seen more people like me when I was growing up, and actually considered it as a viable alternative, because I didn't for so long. So it's super important, I think, that we show up and be proud and brave and seem like we're having a good time.
Well, Paulsbo Pride is this Saturday, and they had an incident in June where, when the pride flags were put up, somebody took a knife and slashed them, right? And the interesting kind of fallout from that was that a lot of the people, the storefront people, wanted to replace those flags. But what happened that I thought was so wonderful is a young person, decided to mend them with visible mending. So you could see that damage had been done, but you could see that it had been repaired. And I thought, what a beautiful kind of symbol of so many struggles, really, right? Like you try so hard to make something beautiful. Somebody wants to, out of fear, out of ignorance, out of misunderstanding, whatever, uh, wants to break it. But that mending, it's like making and mending is really strong. I feel like it's something that's a really good symbol in some weird ways for pride. And who was saying that historic
Yeah,
society? Who is that?
I heard from one of the guys up in Poulsbo Pride that the Poulsbo Historical Society had asked if they could have one of these banners after the Pride Month was over with, because they want to keep it as part of their collection as an artifact.
Yeah. And isn't that an interesting thing? You could probably take that down now, Reed, because there's other stuff on that page that's a little distracting. I feel like the way that the museums are treating so many things, like asking for COVID masks that people were making, asking for like mementos. It's like remembering that we are history, right? That we are making history. We are part of history, and we have been all along. I feel like that piece is really pretty awesome. And I love that some of the local museums are supporting that thought, by wanting memorabilia of some of these passages, and
Mm-hmm.
difficult times as well as beautiful times.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, Eve.
I'm sorry, I lost track of time.
It's okay. We're glad to have you. We were kind of, everybody was kind of remembering their first experiences of the first Pride parades or the first Pride events they went to. What do you remember?
I didn't. I'm trying to remember if the first Pride event I went to, I know exactly. And I'm just trying to, I've lost myself here. Okay, let's just do this. Because that was in 2016. And I've told this story before, but I had been trying to set up what I was calling West Sound Transbrella. And to do basically what Rainbow Crew is doing now, being a connection between different communities, trans communities across the peninsulas. And I succeeded in finding the Port Townsend group, and I already was part of the Kitsap group, trans group. And I was driving back, and I said, "Oh, that's good. This is going to work. This is going to work. This is I just have to become now I have to do I was telling myself, well, I have to get in touch with these people and those people, and one of the things is, and I have to find the Pride community." And I bopped myself on the head and said, "You idiot. You are part of the Pride community now." And I, was able to find out that they were having, Kitsap Pride was having an event up at, the general store up in Port Campbell. And, they were just having some get together up there, some event, because they were celebrating 20 years or 25 years of Kitsap Pride, and they were going to have 20 or 25 events. So I went there to introduce myself and my idea for, West Sound Transbrella. And I got there, and there was plenty of people there, but it was really, really subdued. And I couldn't figure out why this was at all. I'd just been, doing one thing or another. I had gone over to my ex's house to have dinner with them, and that was the last time that I ended up having to get dressed in the car to get from one place to the next place. And all of a sudden, there, we were all holding these candles, up there, up in Port Campbell, and somebody told me, this was in fact the day of the Pulse murders, Pulse nightclub murders. So that was my first Pride event that I was actually a part of.
And
And it was really strange. People were wonderful, but it was like incredibly subdued. People were very sad. And my second event was a vigil for that, for the Polson murders, that was held in at Evergreen Park in Bremerton the next day or two. Meanwhile, everybody I talked to was very friendly up there. It was wonderful.
well, I remember you talking several times about feeling like one of your missions was to interject joy or to remind people about the joy.
I have talked about that because when I came out, and what I thought one of the things that's essential to me, well, about everything I've done, but was part of West Sound Umbrella, was that just like on that event, and when we are strictly the victims, it doesn't do us good to be victims. In fact, being a victim, in my experience, that the dispute resolution says, if one party says that they're the victim of something, the other party will say, no, 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 I am the victim here. I'm the one who's had to put up with everything. I've been the victim of this. I've been the victim of that, which is, I think, really essential and central to our national conversation now. That, the more that we view ourselves as victims and are angry about that, the more the other side says, no, they're the victims. I mean, that's inherent in everything that, people are using as arguments against trans people, against gay people, against Black people, against women. You know, you got people who are, saying, straight white male day, we have to have a, straight white male fest, and, because they're the victims. It's like, incel people, they are the ultimate victims and, are justified in killing women because they've been victimized by women all these years. So, yeah, that's my rational reason for saying that let's not be victims. My irrational, my felt side is really, I am so much better off as myself than I was before. And I've had this experience with other trans people, telling me how much better they feel, that there's a real joy to being yourself. And I think that that's really essential. Reed's offspring, and I happened to meet, where they were working, and when they were working at Paper and Leaf. And, we hadn't seen each other for years before either of us had transitioned because, they were a friend of Adrian's. That was back in, grade school and high school. And we literally, grabbed onto each other and jumped for joy for each other at when we saw each other. And there's that really doesn't get to be counted in our narratives of ourselves. And people aren't that curious about that. They are curious about, well, tell me what it was like before. So, how bad was it? Before.
As a parent, my first reaction was, this is just a lot of pain you're going to put yourself into for. And their response was, you don't understand that this is actually a release of pain in a way.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And I think that being able to show that joy, to show that lack of pain, is really essential. Because otherwise people will just sit there and say, well, yeah, they're just celebrating that they're, with each other.
Before you can show it, you got to experience it. And I think that is something that mentors can help you with. I know, like Rick was talking about his mentors, and I'm sure that part of what they worked with you was like, here's places to be happy, here's places to be, right? I mean, you tell me, but
that's exactly what happened.
I want to hear a little bit from Rick.
That's exactly what happened. The weekend, I came out to myself on Sunday, contacted the president of the Gay People's Association at the UW where I was finishing up my education, and said, there must be other people out here. Who are they? Where are they? And on Wednesday, he called me on Monday. Somehow he got my number right away. Contacted me. We met on Wednesday. And on the weekend, it was Friday or Saturday, I went to a movie with his boyfriend. And then they took me to the Boren Street Disco. And when we pulled into the parking lot, and surprisingly, there was a space there. And when I got out of the car, they were playing Donna Summer's I Need a Man. And I was just ecstatic. And then I walked into this place and showed my ID. And then these two doors opened up. I could walk through these two doors. And suddenly there were 300 gay people all around me, dancing, celebrating. And there was a balcony. So I could stand up there for hours and just watch people. And it was like, nothing I'd ever experienced before. I went from 0 to 300 in a matter of less than a week. And
well, in a lot of ways, that's what pride events for me, like what we're planning to do on the 27th here on the island in Waterfront Park, is having that experience of seeing hundreds of people who express a whole range of things that maybe are like you, or maybe are like nothing you'd ever thought of before, or maybe, but in a joyful way, see, like standing on the balcony looking down at this amazing like smorgasbord or whatever you want to call it, right? This great variety and array of possibilities. I want that for kids, and I want that for seniors, because people who come out later often don't have the wings fully developed yet either, right? And
Yeah.
and sometimes that can be a little tricky. Like, how can I be the butterfly in this, right? I've shed my chrysalis, but I'm still wriggling. I want to take flight. What does that look like? How do I learn? And I think pride events can be celebratory in that way, showing off this whole wide range. I personally really want to see a range, like not just uh, the sort of stereotypical drag queen thing, which is great and fun, but also like watching kids come in they're so much more fluid and flexible, and often display this really creative, imaginative range of expression. And to me, that is so rich. And yet again, I want my grandkids to grow up with that. I want my neighbors and friends to see that too.
Yeah. I enjoyed the first Pride I did on the island, or we had our first booth. I particularly enjoyed and remember very fondly when I could see an adult wanting to come over and talk, but afraid to come over and talk. And I could tell they had questions, and I would just sort of encourage that, a smile, a slight wave. And then they usually want to talk about a family member. How do I talk to them? How do I support them? How do I be there for them? And they're just confused. They don't have a language for it yet. So being able to listen to their stories, giving them an ear, giving them an open heart. You don't know what the possibilities are for those people. And that to me is really joyful. Just to be there for people. And I carried the banner to begin with Mike too at the parade, and I just got a kick out of the cheers that just kept coming up. And you could tell when the dancers went by, they just got great cheers. But then there was a brief pause, and then there was a cheer for us, because we often got separated a bit from the dancers. And it was quite clear that they were celebrating with us. So it was good.
It's awesome. And Mike made a beautiful banner that I think is so cheerful and just good natured and lovely, right? And that's part of it too. It's like, yeah, it's important to remember the whole spectrum of events, but it's also really important to shine the light, like be the light, right, for the next group of people.
I started going to Western Washington State College, it was called then, in the early 1970s, and I was terrified that anybody would suspect or find out that I was gay. And I thought my future held probably suicide. I was feeling that bleak about it. And I remember finding out that there was a gay and lesbian student center on campus, and me finding out where it was and walking by the office, but not being brave enough to even go in because it was too scary. What if somebody saw me? And sort of marveling, like there's people who do that, who walk in, and people would think that about them. And then so I contrast that with about 2 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C., and I got on the metro in D.C., and who should sit in the seat across from me but Derek Kilmer, who's my representative. And I just said, "Hi, Derek." And I talked to him, and he said, "Well, what's new?" And I said, "Well, 4 years ago, I came out as gay." I'm just blurting that out to my congressman, And it was so funny. And then he began to share me stories about people in his family too. And I thought, I have come a hell of a long way.
Mm-hmm. And so has Derek.
Has he? I don't know.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, so many of our elected officials now have been exposed you know, to a lot more people of a whole lot different kinds of people. But I think many of them, like he grew up on the peninsula in a small town, and
Mhm.
I think that for a lot of people, the last few decades have been so educational, and it's great. And what you see when people embrace that education is just this great expansiveness and inclusion, right? And I feel like for all of us, like that model of like opening up the windows, being open to a greater variety and a greater range of expression is just a huge gift. And
Mhm.
that's to me what Pride kind of offers. It's like some people go to gawk, but end up talking to people and being like, oh, look, they're actually people, right? It's like people are people. What do you know? I feel like I should have butterfly costume or something, but what are you thinking, Don?
Well, I was thinking of a story that I'd like to share with you, and that was, it happened 40 years ago. I went back to just to college to finish my undergraduate degree that I'd never finished, in one year, in the first year, and then move into a master's degree program. And it felt so free to just be there and not have to worry about my job or losing my job or whatever. But I misunderstood how strong the problem still was, because I was asked to make a presentation to a Republican group of folks who were interested in what was going on in the world of queer people. We would call ourselves queer then, and I didn't understand how what I was being confronted with, and got back and I was talking with the woman who went with me, and we decided that that was probably something we should have expected. But what happened after that was that I graduated and started using my advisor, who was also the head of the master's degree program, as a reference. And it took 2 years to get a response to applications that I put in for jobs. I wrote about 200 some odd letters and didn't get a single response until I stopped using him as my source of reference. And I just
Ouch.
didn't understand how strong things really were and what I was confronted with.
Hmm.
Oh, that's very painful.
Most of the time.
That brings something up for anybody?
I guess it brings up for me that how easy and wonderful life has been for me in the past 4 years. The fact that I can, without a moment's trepidation, just come out to my congressman, or I mean, it happens all the time, and it used to be such a scary thing, and it's not. I'm sorry that Don had to go through that, and it took him a while to figure out what wasn't working. It must have been so discouraging to send out all those 200 letters and not get any responses. Thank God he figured it out finally what the problem was and was able to work around it. It's such a shame that people could be just dismissed out of hand without knowing anything about the quality of the person they are.
In my time in the corporate world, I had to stay in the closet. I was outside of work. I was living my life, but I was living two lives. At the corporate jobs, I was making the corporation an awful lot of profit, a lot of money. And yet their rule was, it basically don't say, don't tell, don't ask, don't tell. Well, it's the don't ask wasn't in there. They'd ask whenever they wanted to, whatever they wanted. And but you just don't tell. You pretend otherwise, because the rule in the last corporation I worked for, the major corporation, was um, if you are that, if it's known that you're that you're gay, you're fired. That's it. If you had an affair outside of your marriage and you tell somebody, you're fired. That's it. You don't, you, it was just fundamentalism in a corporate structure. And yet it was a good company to work for in terms of opportunities to do my work. But who I was highly respected in that respect for who they thought I was, but not for who I was. So I was glad to get away from that. And something that comes to me now is that I think with Pride, we're showing people it's possible to reclaim your own boundaries of self-worth. That has to come from us. It can't come from anybody else. And as we do that, say, I'm okay with me. And then we give other people permission to be okay with themselves. And I think that's one of the things that we demonstrate in Pride. That is that we truly are proud of who we are. We don't just tolerate who we are, we're proud of who we are. And that way we take power back from those people who we know were responsible for hurting us, like in Dawn's case. But we're the ones establishing that banner that says, I'm good. I hope you're good too, but I'm good. That kind of thing.
Being proud of each other too. It's
I
funny.
wonder if Marcy or Sheila have anything to add.
Yeah, I was going to ask Sheila. I don't want to be the talking the whole time. Come on, Marcy adds love. Thank you, Marcy. How about you, Sheila? I don't know if she's really tuned in or not.
I am tuned in. I'm finding this fascinating as always. Thank you. Appreciate it. And I'm totally in love with a couple of these people on the screen anyway, so it makes it easy for me, and they know who they are. So thank you so much, all of you, for talking.
Well, Sheila, what have you experienced in your lifetime in terms of the way queer people are valued or even seen?
That's being a white female, straight. I have encountered very little opposition to who I am, which has made my life extremely easy. I grew up in New Jersey in an elite area, not much different than Bainbridge Island, actually. It's great schooling in the whole 9 yards. I went to school at the University of Vermont, Burlington. And that was my first experience with anybody who was gay. My roommate, drew a line quite literally down the middle of our room and said, "You shall not come across that line." I was pretty naive, young 16-year-old when I was up there in school, my first year freshman. I didn't know what was going on. It was very strange. It drew me out quite a bit in that I got out into the hallway, quite literally, with other people that were in the building. So Carol, who was very upset and very miserable, her girlfriend had gone to Harvard and didn't want to have much more to do with her. So she was grieving. And Carol ended up sleeping a great deal of the time out in the big room. She and I didn't talk after that much. If I don't remember talking with her at all, to be honest with you. But the interesting thing is that there was a woman who was upstairs. I was on the first floor, she's on the second floor. Her name was Carol as well, but she went by George. She was gay. And I got to know her. I didn't at that time know anything about being queer. Nothing, knew nothing. Other than I met this wonderful woman by the name of George, and she was friendly. Everybody liked her a lot. She was well accepted. She put herself out there. I'm so grateful for that experience. Wherever you are, George, I love you. you made my I had a pretty good college years, my years up at UVM. It was good. And but those were the two folks that I had ever met in my whole life. Which to me is just sort of interesting, but I don't really remember anybody in my high school were gay at all. I'm sure there were, but just didn't know anybody. And so it was, I'm learning, I'm still learning, but I remember George. George makes me feel good in my heart.
It's great when somebody can open our heart to a whole different experience. Well, Eve, what are you thinking about in your journey?
Would you say?
We're just getting ready to kind of wrap it up, and I thought, what would you like to take us out with? What?
Oh, did you say my name?
I did. I said your name.
Oh, I think what was just said by Sheila, that, still learning. And that's really the joy of it. For all of us, I mean, pride for me, going to these pride events is still learning what, meeting new people. And anytime you go out and you have the slightest chance for having a conversation with people. And you just find out something about somebody you didn't know, and you make some new connection. And it's got nothing to do with being trans. It's, it has to do with just being there. And I think that the good thing about any good festival, pride or not, any good community festival, let me say, is that you have a chance to maybe engage with some people that you otherwise would walk by, or who would walk by you. And you can find yourself at a pride festival getting into a conversation you wouldn't believe that you were going to be having. That was not part of the thing. It had nothing to do with partying or dancing or the music. It has to do with people. If you can automatically, by having a table for queer elders, that is like really making yourself vulnerable. For who's ever at that table, you are identified as one of the queer elders. And that lets people come up and say, all right, I know something about you. Let me tell you something about me. And, even if you're walking around after that, they've seen you there, and they may just come up and say, I just got a question, or I just want you to know. Or I thank you for what you're doing, or anything like that. And that whole thing of being in school and knowing that there's such a thing, but walking past it all the time. This is literally, the doors are open. You don't have to open up two doors like at the place on Boren. The doors are already open here.
Mike.
And
oh, sorry.
Yeah, Mike, that these things that people are talking about are allowed to come forth. Sheila can talk about George and say, God darn, why isn't George here today at this festival? And then Sheila can really confuse me by saying, do they really call it, UVM? Like Vermont is two different words? So I just enjoy being
let me check in with Mike just a minute, because one of the things I think about Mike is, like, I don't think I've known anyone who's better at going into a crowd or anywhere, this metro, and just setting up a conversation with people. It's like, I think that's a skill that I would love to kind of learn from you. But it's one of the things, like last year at our booth at Pride, we had chairs set out And one of the things I noticed was like you were one of the people who would just start conversations, like go out to people and make that outreach and have that connection. And I thought that's something I feel like is a really valuable skill for this kind of event, but for any time really, like normalizing who we are in the world by being available and open and friendly in that way.
I guess I should give lessons, but I can't think of how you teach that. I think that I walk through the world looking for people who want to come out and play with me.
Mm.
That's my sort of my mental attitude. If I can just compliment somebody on their fingernail polish or anything to get where they could just say, yeah, I'll play with you. I'll tell you a little bit about myself that's not just, that'll be $5.65, please. That's something beyond the normal rigmarole that we have to play. I just wanted to say to Sheila too, I'm so glad you participated. This is so cool that you decided to chip in on this. So thank you.
You bet. I'm sitting just laughing at you.
Well, laughing's good. I think we kind of probably need to wrap it up because we're at the end of our time, but thank you everybody so much. And I hope that this year's Pride is a friendly, fun, and fulfilling event for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, everybody, thank you for your contributions. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Yes,
Thank
as
you, Ruth.
always, right?
As always.